That song, "The King is Coming," when Stephen emailed this week that we would be singing that song, I thought it was interesting that we're singing that song on Father's Day, because that is one of my personal all-time favorite songs, particularly when my dad sings it, who's a music minister. And Katie asked me that just a second ago, does that remind you of your dad? And I said, yeah, it does. Because I love it when he sings that song. I always request it whenever we go down to Houston, to their house. But I don't know if it's irony or a subtle jab. He always sings it usually the week after we come. So I've got to go back and watch it on streaming because I wasn't there live. But I love that song. Phenomenal song. The King is Coming. If you've never heard that song in great power, you've got to go look it up on YouTube this afternoon. Look up Gate the Vocal Band singing that deal, or Michael English singing that. Michael English will blow your socks off singing that song. But go check that out. But today is Father's Day. We're going to be talking about honor today. Honor in relation to fathers, in relation to those around us. We're going to be mainly in Ephesians chapter 6. So you can turn there if you have a Bible. If not, grab one off the rack. We're going to be on page 979. All the notes as well are in the YouVersion Bible app. Under the events section, you can find our church, and all of our notes are there. When I think of honor, I think of a lot of different things. I can remember back when I was actually not much older than my children are now. My dad being a music minister, I can remember he would take me up to church on Saturdays sometimes, and we would make sure everything was set up and ready to go for Sundays. There's one that really sticks out in my mind. Is going to the church, walking around and getting things, situated just right because of what will be going on in the service the next day, getting the microphones in the right spot, making sure the pulpit had been pulled out, making sure this. And this was a time when the church we were at had a temporary stage. They were in a double gym area, getting ready to build their sanctuary, and so they had this portable stage. And so the stage at times during the week had parts of it that were taken out for other things, and so we had to go in, make sure the stage was all set up, sometimes put parts of the stage up, sometimes move speakers, sometimes do whatever you had to do. And so we were up there doing this, and the choir was going to have a special song the next day, and so we were making sure the choir mics were just situated just so, and they were in the right spot. However, the cords that went to the microphones were not very neatly tucked away. They were just kind of thrown there on the ground. And Dad was doing something in the sound booth or getting something out of his office, and he told me how to do the cords properly. You got to get them down the pole, make them look nice and neat, run really nice and neat along the floor, and then curl them up over here and plug them into the system. And I made the comment as an 11, 12-year-old. And I said, why do this? I mean, it's up here by the choir. Nobody can see it. It's tucked away behind a little step thing. Nobody can see it. Not even the choir can see that you roll it up. Nobody's going to step over it. The choir comes in this way. The other people come in here. Why do this? I could be doing something else. Why do I need to fix the chords a certain way? And he said, well, nobody may see it. Nobody may know it, but you will know it, and I will know it, and the Lord will know it. He said, what you can do with how you lay out the chords is you can honor the Lord even in how the chords are laid out. Because even though no one can see it, even laying out chords can be worship if you're doing it to honor the Lord. How often in our own lives do we do that? Do we honor the Lord by how we load the dishwasher? Honor the Lord by how we take out the trash? Honor the Lord by how we respond to our spouse when they say that one thing in that one tone that really sets us off. Honor the Lord in how we speak to our parents, or let's go a different route, how we think about our parents or our teachers or our boss or our coworkers or that one guy at Walmart who always grabs the kind of bread you like before you get there. How you respond or how you react in a lot of times, is it honoring to the Lord? Honor the Lord in how we do things can be a reflection of our own hearts. And what we're going to see today in Ephesians chapter 6 is some ways that honor can be reflected in our lives and our actions. So Ephesians chapter 6, we're going to start in verse 1. Now the Apostle Paul is writing this particular section of Ephesians and kind of giving instructions on how to live the Christian life. He talks about relationships between a husband and wife, relationships between parents and children, relationships between employee and employer, and relationships just in general between Christian and other Christians, between Christian and people who are not Christians. And he discusses relationships. And in this particular passage of Scripture, he talks about parents and children. And Paul says in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." Now let me pray, and that'll be the end of the service. We'll just end it right there. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Now, Paul, you can't just take a verse by itself and take it out of context, because he says here, children, this is a reflection, as he's going to say in the next verse, of how you honor. You obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that children, you only obey your parents when they are truly reflecting the Lord. And the fact that your dad did not reflect the Lord in the tone he used when he told you to empty the dishwasher, so you don't have to do it because it's not in the Lord. And you bring him Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1 and say, see, right here it says, in the Lord, and you weren't in the Lord when he said that. That's how to get in bigger trouble. Don't do that. Children, obey your parents in the Lord in this context. Verse 2, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Now, Paul is quoting from the Old Testament, one of the commandments, honor your father and mother that it may go well with you and live long in the land. That is the promise that goes with that commandment. You will live long in the land. You will have a good life. That is a principle that honoring your parents is honoring to the Lord. And so how you honor is by obedience in one reflection. But what does honor truly mean? I mean, we hear that and we say that and we think that and we talk about that a lot. Honor your father and mother. To honor someone in this, the way Paul uses this word, is to attribute high status to somebody. By honoring, to attribute high status to them in how you act towards them, in how you speak towards them, or in how you think about them. Attribute high status. If you take the word honor back to its original meaning in Scripture, to honor is to commit one's life and possessions to the thing being honored. To commit one's life and possessions to the thing being honored. Now, if you were, though, to analyze your life and what you commit your life and possessions to, what would then, in truth, be the things that you honor? What would be the things that you honor? Netflix? Certain choices you make at a career? That one aisle in Walmart? If you were to assess the things that you commit your life and possessions to, are those things truly honorable, worthy of being honored? See, when it comes to this kind of honor that Paul is speaking about, honoring your father and mother, that it may go well with you and you may live long in the land, this is honoring, attributing high status to something, or particularly in this case, someone, in words, in what you say, in actions, in how you act towards that person, but also in your motivations, in your thought processes, valuing someone else more than yourself. Because honoring, in truth, is a denial of self, because you're lifting up the other person. You're lifting them up. It's a denial of yourself. Because honor points to someone else. Pride points to me. Honor points to someone else. Pride points to me. And the struggle, though, becomes in honoring somebody else and lifting somebody else up. We can do that all day long with our words or even with our actions, honor them. But the true struggle becomes when we try to honor somebody in our motivations in how we lift them up. Because sometimes we will honor somebody in truth because it brings attention on ourselves. It lifts us up. Some of us, I'm throwing myself in the category, let's say we honor our children in a certain aspect, maybe in respect to their athletic ability. In truth, we honor them because there is a little bit of selfish motivation in there, and we take great pride in the fact that they're our child and they did this great thing. And when people see them and see us honoring them, they're really thinking about us and how great we are as a parent because we, led them down this path. Or it could be in doing something for your spouse. You're really honoring your spouse because of what you will get in return. Or you do something at work and you honor somebody at work because of what you will get in return. That there may, in truth, be some selfish motivation behind the honor that is there. And so in honoring, we're not biblically honoring. We may be honoring in word and action, but we're not honoring in motivation. And if there is no honor in motivation, it is not true biblical honor. It has to have all three elements to be biblical honor. It's got to be in word, it's got to be in action, and it's got to be in motivation. And it's got to have those two components to it that we talked about. It's got to be a commitment of life, and it's got to be a commitment of possession. You got to have some buy-in to this thing. And for children, we see there in verse 1, one form of honor is obedience. That's not the only way children obey or honor their parents. That is just one form of obedience. And honor takes all kinds of forms, of which obedience is just one. I can think of one instance when one of our children obeyed absolutely. And you love it when your children obey absolutely. Without argument, without complaint. And that's what happened in this case. I mean, this is one of those ones that really stands out. They didn't complain, they didn't argue, they just straight obeyed, and it was amazing for a moment. There was one afternoon, it was probably, if I remember correctly, it was like a Sunday afternoon. Katie and I were resting, and sometimes, I don't know how it works in your house, but if you're resting, as we were, and you turn on, for us, if you turn on a home building show or one of those things, particularly on a Sunday afternoon, that's instant sleep medicine. And for us on a Sunday afternoon. And so we had one of those on, and we were laying in bed and had one of those shows on, but we had the blinds open. You could see into the backyard, and the boys were in the backyard playing. And we could hear them, and if you're in a neighborhood, you can hear them too. And they were out there playing and having a good time. And then one of them came over to the window and was saying something to us. And I said, I can't hear you. I don't know what you're saying. I think Katie had fallen asleep, and so I was mouthing this, trying to say it so I didn't wake her up. And I said, I don't know what you're saying. Speak a little louder. And he tried to speak a little louder, and I still can't, I don't get what you're saying. It was a combination of the TV show and the window, and then his brothers making ample other noise that I could not quite get what was coming through the sound there. And I said, just come in and tell me what you're saying. And so I hear the door open from the backyard to the house, and I hear him walking through the house and coming around, and he comes around to my side of the bed, and he goes, Dad, I stepped in dog mess. Oh, God. I go, okay, and I sit up. Sure enough, there's tracks through the house. I said, oh, thank you for obeying. Take your shoe off. And we had to go and clean all that up. But he obeyed. He didn't say, I can't come in. Of course, he didn't take his shoe off either. But I said, come in and tell me what you got to say. And he did. He obeyed absolutely and honored his father in doing so. And that definitely woke me up there in that moment. But obedience is just one form of honor. Honor takes all kinds of forms. Obedience. Paul gives several other examples in this chapter and the previous. Submission is a form of honor. Kindness is a form of honor. And kindness is something we don't often reflect because remember, it's got to take the form of action, it's got to take the form of words, and it's got to take the form of motivations. Even though a lot of times we may be kind in what we're saying, we may be kind in what we're doing, but we're not kind in our motivation. We're not kind in what we're really thinking about that person in the moment. Kindness is a form of honor. Grace is another form of honor, offering grace to anyone, even the person who has hurt us the most, even the person who is frustrating to us the most, but offering even that person phenomenal grace because we have been offered phenomenal grace by Jesus. Another form of honor is peace. Peace. Paul actually writes in another one of his letters, he says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. That doesn't mean live at peace only with those people who are nice to you, only with those telemarketers who call your cell phone, because that's a thing now, and don't be and aren't pushy. Have peace with those. Only have peace with those people who don't complain. Only have peace with those people who are not negative. Only have peace with those people on Facebook who don't talk about politics. No, he says have peace with everyone. Now notice though, Paul's qualifier in that statement is as far as it depends on you. You can't control what somebody else does. You can't control what other people do in response to you, but you can, as far as it depends on you, be peaceable in how you speak, act, and think. And in doing so, you are honoring. Another form of honor may be holding your tongue, not saying every little thing that pops into your head. That's a good way to sleep on the couch. Don't say everything that you feel like you need to say. Oh, I'm just being honest. A lot of times in that case, it's better to be quiet than be honest. That can be honoring. You know, another one, this may be one of the most difficult ones, is an intolerance of gossip. An intolerance of gossip, not tolerating gossip in your presence about another situation or another person or something that's going on. We all have, when we hear gossip, it almost, stirs us up. And we think, oh, something's going bad for that person. That means things are going better for me. And we hear this gossip and we spread this gossip and we become fertilizer for the gossip. But let's take it a step further. Not just hearing gossip, or dispelling gossip or shutting the gossip down as honoring. What about having an internal intolerance of gossip? Because how often is gossip not just something we hear and respond to, but it's something that we ferment within our own minds? We see somebody make a comment about something. We may hear somebody make a comment in a conversation. And so we make assumptions about that person because of what they said or because of the situation. And we continue to allow that to percolate within our brains. And we are spreading the gossip with ourselves and making the situation worse in our own minds. And in truth, we're working to tolerate gossip in us and dishonoring that person and that situation and ultimately the Lord by not having an internal intolerance of gossip. That requires honor. And finally, instead of having doubt about someone, giving that someone the benefit of the doubt. More often than not, maybe when we hear gossip or we see somebody, we may have doubts about that person or even about that person's motivation. Instead of giving that person the benefit of the doubt. And in doing so, we dishonor them and we dishonor the Lord. Honor takes many forms. And then Paul in verse 4 gives us an example for fathers, for parents. Paul writes, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." He says, do not provoke your children to anger. Don't poke at them. Don't frustrate them. Don't, under the guise of challenging your children in truth, be provoking them and pointing them away from Jesus. He says, don't provoke them. Instead, point them to Jesus through discipline, through instruction of the Lord. I heard this quote the other day, several weeks ago, and I could not find who said it. But it's a great quote nonetheless. It is, how you talk to your children becomes their inner voice. How you talk to your children becomes their inner voice. The words you say, the tone you use when you say it, it becomes their inner voice. Deeply convicting, deeply. That quote has come to my mind many times over the last several weeks. How you talk to your children becomes their inner voice. But let's take it a step further than that. What if how you talk to everyone around you becomes their inner voice? Would you want your influence in negativity, in gossip, in dishonor to be reflected not just in the life of that person, but in succeeding generations because of a conversation that person had with you? If you say something dishonoring and then it is reflected in their inner voice and passed on to their children and passed on to their children, and it all began with one conversation you had with that checker at the store when you yelled at them because of something they could not control. What you say, how you talk to your children becomes their inner voice. And we see in that example there of how fathers can honor their children by pointing them to Jesus, by doing those two things that he mentions there in the rest of the verse. He says to bring them up in discipline and the instruction of the Lord. That means to train them with the proper ways to conduct themselves, the proper ways to behave, and the proper ways to believe. To point them consistently to Jesus. But something we have to understand about honor, as we see in this verse, both when he's talking to children, Paul says, children, obey your parents, imperative. And then he says in verse 2, honor your father and mother. And then in verse 4, do not provoke, bring them up. All of those are imperatives. It's not the option. He doesn't say, children, honor your father and mother only if they are honorable. Parents, honor your children only if they are acting honorably. No, he doesn't say that because in truth, honor is not earned. Honor is given. Honor is given and not earned. Honor isn't given because somebody deserves it. In truth, none of us deserve it. If you really want to examine all of our lives, we don't deserve to be honored. Honor must be given. Honor really doesn't have much to do with the person receiving it. Honor has everything to do with the one giving it. Honor has less to do with the receiver than the giver. Honor is a reflection of the heart of the giver, more than it is a reflection of the heart of the one receiving it. Honor must be given because we have been given honor by Jesus. You know, we can honor the waiter at the restaurant by our tip instead of what they may have earned or what we think they have earned in their quality of service. We tip them in reflection to the honor we have received from Jesus in how we respond to them in that moment. Honor has to do with our hearts. And if we're willing to give it away without indiscriminately, without prejudice, without needing to have our honor earned, we just give it and give it and give it. And Paul speaks to this in another passage of Scripture. Romans chapter 12, verse 1, or verse 10. Paul writes, love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Now, the way Paul writes this verse is very fascinating because the second part has to be taken in context of the first part. He says, love one another with brotherly affection. And then the second part of the verse is a how-to. You love one another with brotherly affection by doing this, by outdoing one another and showing honor. Honor is given to anybody and everybody. We're supposed to love one another, love everyone, not just love certain people, not just love nice people, not just love people we like. He says love one another, anybody, everybody, and in doing so, you must outdo one another in showing honor. Honor isn't supposed to be singularly reserved for only the elite. You reserve the honor you give for God, and you reserve the honor you give to the worthy. It makes me think of Thor, and his hammer, Mjolnir, that whosoever holds this hammer will possess the power of Thor. Whosoever lives honorably will receive my honor. And if they don't, then may hell rain down on their head because they did not live honorably. We have to be a reflection of God's heart. And if we demand that somebody must live honorably in order to gain the honor that whatever honor we have to give is to do the opposite of what God did. Because if you think about it, God honors us all the time. God honors us daily through his protection and provision. We didn't earn God's protection and provision, but he gives it anyway. The fact that you're alive means that God has protected you at some point in your life. I could tell you story after story in my own life. I can think of a car accident, several actually, car accidents that happened. One literally inches from my vehicle. I was driving down I-35 in Dallas in college, and this car was coming alongside and all of a sudden swerved in front of me, came over to the other side of my vehicle, smashed into the barricade, came back this way, around again the front of my car, and went over into the median. Somehow that car didn't touch mine at all. At all. And if you think that's coincidence, you're nuts. that a car can go like this, hit the barrier, and then go all the way back around like this, all while we're going 70 miles an hour. It doesn't work that way. That's not the way physics functions. God protected me in that moment. There's another time we were driving to Dallas from Waco with all the kids in the car, coming back from Magnolia, and it was rainy. And this car, seconds in front of us, hit a wet spot on the road, skidded, flipped, bodies flying out of the vehicle. If we had left a fraction of a second later, if I had been going a fraction faster, we would have been right next to that car when it flipped. But God protected us in that moment and took care of us. God's protection and provision are daily and constant, and God honors us in doing that, not because we deserve it, not because we honor it, or because we earned it, but because He loves us, and He reflects His love in how He honors us. And ultimately, He has honored us in sending us Jesus to die in our place so that our sins would be forgiven, and He raised Jesus from the dead so that we can live after we die. He has honored us time and time again. And we should be reflecting that honor in our lives. God honors us whether we deserve it or not, and spoiler, we don't deserve it. So we must then do what God has done, because honor is to be given away indiscriminately. Without concern to what the other person has done, we must still honor because we have been honored. Now, how we honor may be different depending on the person and the situation, and it should be. But we should still do it. We should still live honorably. And we do, as we talked about earlier, we must honor through a combination of a commitment of our life and a commitment of our possessions, our money, our finances. You know, and even if that person is dishonoring to you, your thought shouldn't be, if that person's dishonoring you, well, how can I get back to them? How can I make them feel the pain that I feel? How can I spew back out onto them the vengeance that I desire them to have? That they make me feel so bad, that they are doing this and this and this, and I don't feel those are the right decisions, and it's all affecting me and my life, and so I want them to feel as bad about those decisions as I do. And so in doing so, though, both in our words and maybe we're discussing it with other people, spreading gossip, maybe in our actions and trying to undo some of those things, maybe in our thought processes by continually having those imaginary conversations, we are really in truth dishonoring that person, the situation, and the Lord. Honor should be a way we live. It should be a way of life. We should be thinking, instead of, how can I get back at that person? That when they're dishonoring us, our thought in peace should be, how can I honor them? Now that takes massive spiritual maturity to be able to get to that point. It's difficult. That when somebody's dishonoring to you, when somebody is speaking dishonorably to you or doing dishonorable actions to you, your instinctive reaction may be something along the lines of punching them in the face. Metaphorically, of course. You know, or just taking the matter into your own hands. But if we're reflecting the heart of God, our reflection should be, how can I honor this person? Even in this moment, with the words that they're saying, how can I honor them? Because that is what Paul writes there in Romans chapter 12, verse 10. We're supposed to be outdoing one another in showing honor, because that is how we reflect the love of Jesus that He has already shown us. The more love you have, the more honor you will give. And in truth, the way you get more love is by having more Jesus in your life. So the more Jesus you have, the more love the more honor you will give. You see, an abundance of honor is always given where an abundance of Jesus is present. An abundance of honor is always given where an abundance of Jesus is always present. So the inverse is also true. If there is a lack of honor, that must mean that there is a lack of Jesus. That is very true. I can speak personally from how I have reacted and responded to people. When I react dishonorably, that's not because I've got an abundance of Jesus in that moment. That's because I've got a massive lack and I've got an abundance of my own emotion. Where there is an abundance of emotion, there is a lack of wisdom oftentimes. You must rely on Jesus, because the more Jesus is influencing you, the more you will be honoring to others. The more that Jesus is influencing you, the more you will be honoring to others. It is a true reflection of the heart of God, of the heart of Jesus, when we honor those around us. Even the difficult ones, even the problem people, even the ones that we don't like, even the ones that have caused all kinds of turmoil in our family, in our job, that are standing in our way, that are preventing us from following Jesus as we perceive that fellowship. But if Jesus is truly influencing us, then we will seek to honor that person as well. And so here's the challenge for this week, this idea of honor. The more Jesus you have, the more that you honor. Going out and honoring indiscriminately anyone, everyone, as much as possible. Is I want you to pick 2 different places this week. Maybe it's your home and your job. Maybe it's your home and you've got maybe an active Facebook life and Facebook. Maybe it's home and the store. Maybe it's home and the people you talk to on the phone. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's your in-laws. Maybe it's your neighbors, your friends. But pick 2 particular locations, 2 particular groups of people, and then make a strategic plan to honor one person from each of those places every day this week. That may mean you have to double up on some people this week. Maybe God has already brought somebody to your mind. When I talked about somebody who lives dishonorably, who consistently dishonors you, maybe that person's already present in your mind, and you need to strategically plan to honor that person every day this week. Say, don't talk about that. I'll pretend to be asleep real quick. Maybe God is already convicting you of somebody you need to honor, somebody you need to take a step, and you say, but that will be humiliating. But that, you don't know. And I don't know. But if the Lord's convicting you, that's not me. If the Lord's convicting you, you got to do it. Don't resist his turning in your life. So plan to honor one person from each of those places as many times as possible. Let's just say one day for each day of the week. Just pick somebody and say, I'm going to honor this person on Monday. I'm going to honor this person on Tuesday. I'm going to honor this person on Wednesday. And plan on how to honor them. Make a plan on how to do it. Because sometimes when, it's not something we do regularly, we need to create the muscle memory so that it can become instinctive the next time. Because most of us, me leading the pack, do not honor in every situation, in every conversation, in every reaction. And so we have to build up that muscle memory. We got to intentionally do it on purpose. Honor that person. Because we need to become a generation of people known for hearts of honor more so than known for our outrage at whatever the flavor of the moment happens to be. We need to be honorable because Jesus is. And if you today need to know Jesus, need to know him, need to embrace the honor that he has laid out for us, then now is your opportunity to believe that Jesus is God's Son, that he died so that all your sins would be forgiven. And then he rose from the dead so that you can live after you die. And if you want to believe that today, embrace eternity. Come to know the honor we're talking about, the peace that we're talking about, the life that we're talking about, then come and do that today. This is your invitation. I'm going to pray, and I want you to talk to me or talk to Micah. Grab anybody off the stage and talk to us about what God desires. How God wants you to live your best life possible, and it begins with a foundation of Jesus. Maybe you need to today pray about your own heart and how you have been living and how you have been honoring or not so much in your life. You can come up here at the altar, at the stairs, and you can pray for your heart, for your life. You can pray for that particular person who popped up in your mind that you're really struggling with trying to honor that person this week. And you don't know how it's going to happen or what it's going to happen, because inevitably that person is going to say something that they're going to pop off, and it's going to be dishonoring. And you can already feel your reaction wheels turning to whatever you're anticipating them saying. And you need the wisdom of God from James 1:5 about how to honor them.